You're tuned into the Writing Community Chat Show, the live streaming YouTube podcast that brings you the stories of authors, screenwriters, and more. Indie or established, this show's for the community, and we invite you to be a part of it. Head to thewritingcommunitychatshow.com for more info. The WCCS. Together as one, we get it done.
Hello, my name is Chris, and you are watching the Writing Community Chat Show. Hello and welcome, and yes, I completely missed where that video was right then, hence the weird strange faces. Welcome to the show. It's Thursday, and that means we are one day away from the weekend, which we all love to get to, especially if you're in the UK right now. It's really hot, and I know us Brits have a tendency of being whingers about the weather, but wow, this is definitely hot for us, and it is definitely uncomfortable in the night times, I can tell you that. Hello to everyone in the chat. Thank you for turning up and tuning in. As always, appreciate you guys for doing so, and we're gonna have a bit of a fun show tonight. We've got a great guest on with a bit of a different vibe to what we normally have. There's a few different elements of writing involved with this, and a story I'm sure we will all enjoy. And again, if you have any questions, as always, guys, drop them in throughout the show. We can ask the questions, and specifically we can ask them towards the end of the show as well, where the section is for you to do so. Linda, thank you for this response, and it says weird strange faces is always a perk of the show. There you go. So that goes to show just exactly what we are like. Yeah, fantastic. I'd like to start the show with some news, as we always do. So just a heads up on the indie takeover. This is something that the show's been running and involves us as a community supporting an indie author from that community as best we can by buying their books, reviewing them if possible, supporting them on social media, all of those good things. And AS Tasky was our first indie author of the month of the show ever, and that was this month, and she's doing pretty well. She's getting her percentages up just a little bit since this started. And I've just left a review from the community chat show on her Amazon page. And, you know, I read that book. And as you guys know, I'm not really a fantasy reader, but this was extremely saucy is the word, perhaps erotic, and very interesting, in fact. And there's a lot of a very cool story involved with that. And I've downloaded the prequel, which is free to you guys if you go to her website and subscribe to her email list, and you get the free prequel, and that will give you an insight as to kind of how that story is, and kind of I guess the detail in which it goes to. Also, yeah, great to hear. So what I want to say is that round 2, as in we are now doing polls for the next genre to choose our authors from for next month, which is just a couple of weeks away, is going to end this week. So if you want to vote for your genre to be in with a chance of being our next indie author, you need to do so this week before the end of Sunday, for example, because once that vote closes, if your genre is not the top of that list, we won't be selecting you guys for the next vote to select our indie author, because once we get down to the final 4, it then goes up to another vote like it did last time, and whoever gets the most votes becomes our author of the month for next month. And I will do exactly the same. You will have a dedicated webpage. We'll buy your books, review it, all that great stuff, and really support you. And hopefully the community gets in there as well. So if you want that to happen, then you need to make sure your genre is definitely within that vote, and winning that vote, should I say. So what else have we got? Oh, very quickly before tonight's guest comes on, Dale Roberts. You may have seen him on the show before. You most likely have. He is a fantastic self-publishing advocate, and he's got a fantastic YouTube channel that I really leaned on during my self-publishing journey, and you should definitely do that too. But if you head over to his YouTube page today, you will see a thumbnail with my ugly mug on it, as we were doing a video to celebrate 200 shows on this show, 200 episodes of the Writing Community Chat Show. You can learn all about why the show started, how it started, its journey, and some of the favorite moments in there as well. So that is certainly worth checking out. And thank you, Dale, so much for doing that for me, and just inviting me to your show, which is an incredible show as well. So thank you for that. Okie dokie. Let's get today's okie dokie. Not said that on the show before. Let's get today's guest on because I'm hoping we can get some laughs in here and find out exactly why some of the things in this person's life have happened. So soon enough, we will get this guest on once I find the right tab. I am all over the shop today, guys. Okay. So tonight's guest is a comedian, which is always good, a writer, an actor, and a director based in Los Angeles. She's a house team performer at the Upright Citizens Brigade, which is really interesting. And her sexy travel memoir, Where to Nest, will be out in the coming year. So I'm very excited to find out all about that. And Where to Nest is a clue for tonight's guest. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Kristen Van Nest. Hello to you.
Hello.
Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
First of all, thank you so much for joining me. And as we spoke briefly before, we've both been a bit hectic today in our lives.
Yes.
So it's great to come together here now and try and move on from that, I guess.
Yeah. Have fun. The
yes.
day's over, chill out a little bit.
Definitely. Heading for the weekend and all that kind of good stuff. Kristen, how are you doing? Are you okay?
Good. I heard it's hot where you are. I'm in Los Angeles, so it's also very hot here.
Yeah, I mean, oh, wow. The UK, we generally, if we get to like 20 degrees, we think, oh, this is quite warm. At the moment, it's like 27, 28. And like early next week, they're talking about early to mid 30s. And for us, that's really, really hot.
I was in London for 3 weeks in May, and it was like perfect, beautiful, sunny weather. And everyone I talked to was like, this never happens. Like, you are somehow so lucky. And I'm like, I'll take it. I will take this beautiful weather.
Absolutely. So, life in LA then, is it generally quite warm often, or do you have quite a bit of a mixed weather
so for us, cold is like, this is in Fahrenheit, I don't know Celsius, but 60s. So like, I don't know what's perfect temperature in Celsius. Perfect temperature in Fahrenheit, and maybe people in the chat will disagree, is like 72 degrees.
Oh, so I'm not sure in degrees at all, to be honest with you. So I can't. I'll have to dip out on that one.
It gets kind of cold here, but not really cold at all. But like, my body has just like adjusted to the temperature here. So if it's slightly cold, I'm complaining and miserable, and it's a whole thing. I grew up on the East Coast in Connecticut, where it's freezing cold. And whenever I go back there, I'm just extremely sad and pathetic, basically. My family's like, why? 60 degrees is 15.
Yeah, apparently so. And I'm very surprised because 15 is like an early summer temperature for us.
Yes. Yeah.
So
but in LA, that's like cold. Yes. And then I'm like, have a jacket on, a sweater, like the warm socks. I look like I'm like, living in like a pilgrim situation.
You will see in the UK at 15 degrees, people in shorts. I can guarantee you.
Yes.
Absolutely guarantee it. And it also says the Upright Citizens Brigade is awesome. And I'm sure we'll jump into that at some point in the show. Yeah.
Yes.
Great stuff. Yes. Okay, so I mean, it's great that you joined me, and we will get into more of the comedy things and your writing a bit further on. But what we always do at the start of the show is find out kind of where you've come from. And I'm not talking about your location; you kind of already spoken about that. But I'll play a little video, and what we want to do is kind of jump back in time and find out how you became a comedian, how you became a writer, and all those kind of good things, and what fed into that, and see if we can pick up some life lessons along the way, and just kind of enjoy that story and maybe reflect on some parts that are relatable in terms of struggle when it comes to writing and trying to get published and all of these things. So let me play the video and we'll jump straight into that. Just jumping back to the weather, and Linda says, I know people who wear shorts all year up north. We know those people. Okay, Kristen, if you could let us know a little bit about where kind of, I guess comedy is definitely, writing is in the forefront of that as well. And being a writer and a director and all these great things, that must have started or stemmed from somewhere. And do you kind of remember what that was for you?
Yeah. So growing up, my mom's a painter. So I
Mm,
grew up in like a very creative house, but I saw how hard it is to make a career being creative. And so I kind of like resisted that side of myself. And like very much focused on doing business. And as part of that, I moved to Shanghai for where I lived in China for 3.5 years.
yeah.
So while I was over there, I was working for a beauty brand, and someone was like, "You connect with people through humor." And I was like, I do. Like I didn't even like, I wasn't like the funny kid growing up. That wasn't like my thing. I'm pretty serious. And so I was like, oh, maybe this is like a thing.
Mm,
So I started doing improv and stand up in Shanghai in English, not that impressive. And let's see, Charna Halpern from IO, which is a school in Chicago, came over and taught a class. And she's like one of the founders of improv and a huge part of it. And I had taken like Improv 101, which if I were in the US, there would be no way that I'd ever be taught by her because it would be like more senior people who are experienced. But in China, it's like whatever. So I had taken Improv 101. My first show ever was in front of her, like my first time
wow.
on stage performing ever. And I just didn't tell anyone. I just acted like I should be there. And it was just like such a high getting off stage. And I was like, okay, I'm addicted to this. This is great. So I started doing stand up and improv maybe like 5-ish nights a week. I was consistently on stage. And then I visited LA, and I didn't have any plans of moving there or anything. It was like a
Mm,
family vacation. And I took classes at the Upright Citizens Brigade, and there was a full-time 2 Disney princesses in my class, like Elsa and Mulan. Disneyland, their entire career is being Disney princesses. And I was like, I don't know if I want to be a Disney princess, but apparently if you move to LA, you can be whatever you want. So I was like, okay, cool. I guess we're doing this. So moved here, and kind of like that's how it all started, really on the performer side. And then I was writing satire for like McSweeney's, Slackjaw, like a bunch of satirical publications, and then writing jokes on Twitter. And yeah, from there it kind of took off. And that's kind of like how I really got into writing. I started writing personal essays, which got into literary reviews. I got an agent, sold the book. So like that whole process, which was amazing and exhilarating. And now I'm in the middle of writing. So writing the first book, which is amazing, which is my travel memoir on all those great experiences all over the world.
yeah, I can imagine there are a lot of those experiences you can put into this memoir, obviously, while you're writing it. But going back to not that impressive in Shanghai, I think completely impressive in English or not. I mean, first of all, doing that in front of someone you see as a peer and kind of want to impress as a first performance is terrifying. Also, improv must be extremely terrifying.
Yeah, it's funny because stand up is supposed to look improvised, but you're preparing and memorizing
Yeah.
and everything in advance. Improv is supposed to look planned, but you're doing it all in one. And I feel like both are very fun in different ways, but
Mm,
definitely my heart is with improv because it just like is so much fun. And it's just like a release. Like you have to like fully be in the moment, kind of like in that flow state. And I feel like with stand up, the skills you learn in stand up are essential to writing comedy just because you learn how to set up a joke, you get to see how people react to things. It's like very much a master class kind of in comedy.
mm. So, do you feel like there is a genuine structure to writing comedy then?
Yes, I feel like the key is to create surprise,
Okay.
because the funny comes out of an expectation that is then not what people experience.
Mm,
And so I think this is my opinion, but I think all good writing has great structure. Um, it is very hard to master structure, and structure is the boring part. When I'm writing an outline or a joke, the structure is like when I'm least in love with the story, just
mm.
because I think good structure is consistent and not exciting. But what makes your voice as a writer is the meat that you put on those bones, and that's how you kind of create something unique.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I know a lot of people who want to write comedy into their work, and some people who don't even realize that they're doing it. But I mean, would you have any tips for someone who's trying to write, say, as characterization, write dialogue? How
Yeah.
do they kind of make someone a bit more comical if they're trying to make a funny character?
Yeah. So when I'm writing, I write, as many call the poop draft, right? The like terrible, just like getting it out of your head.
Yeah.
Then I go through back again and edit it, kind of like, what is the story? What are the elements? As a writer myself, I'm not the best in the poop draft adding emotions. And so I go back and I'm like, okay, what is the like character arc, which is based on the character's emotions, right? And then the third step I do is the jokes, because if I try and focus on the jokes while I'm writing, it's, it's like getting distracted, right? Like I can't just get it out of my head. But when you go back and do that third level, that part's really fun, because it's like, okay, I'm just sitting here and like picturing what's happening, and then like, how do I make it funnier? So if it's dialogue, it's like, what is the conversation about? What do you expect the other person to say? Well, what if they say the opposite? So it's really thinking about that. And then if you're writing descriptions, it's like, what are the metaphors or kind of like pieces that that make that unique thing? Like I don't know, I described like my first kiss as like having a nerd rope thrash around in my mouth, right? Like kissing is not supposed to be like a hard candy, like thrashing around your mouth. So I think about like, what is the thing that you expect? And then what is the thing you don't expect? And like, that's kind of how I think comedy works best. And then the next layer I go through is, who is the joke making fun of? Because in comedy, there's this concept of don't punch down, which is like never make fun of disenfranchised groups. And that's different for everyone, right? Like it depends on who you are in relation to others. And so for me, I want my comedy to be inclusive. I don't want to encourage stereotypes. And so it's important for me to be like, okay, well, who is this joke making fun of? Is it making fun of a person in power? Is it making fun of myself? Is it making like, what is the content, just to make sure that I'm not hurting people through things that I'm saying, which I think is an important lens, and gotten a lot more awareness recently than it has in the past.
I think you're absolutely right with that, because the last thing you want to do in kind of any story is be taking away from the story itself and distracting people by possibly offending them as well. So you do have to be careful in that sense. But
yeah,
so you went from your comedy, and you mentioned you started writing kind of essays and all these things, but how is your approach to getting signed or getting yourself an agent? Was it kind of similar to kind of the writing sense, where you put submissions in and you kind of wait for responses? Is that kind of how it works for you?
Yeah. So so in nonfiction, you sell on proposal, not on final manuscript. So I like pre-COVID, I was doing so many different things. I ran Night Pants, which is a YouTube channel where I wrote, acted, and directed in sketches. I was like performing on stage at Upright Citizens Brigade like multiple times a week. Like there was so much going on. And a little bit of a silver lining with COVID was like, oh my God, I can't do any of these things anymore. I just need to focus. So luckily I took a class through UCB with Margot Lightman, who I highly recommend. And it was on memoir writing. And so it was really like understanding pieces of the proposal. And I also had another author friend who shared her proposal that she used to sell her book. So I was able to kind of like look at that and then shape my own proposal. And then, yeah, I just cold emailed agents. So literally, like, I think I've already been over, I'm a little A-type, like Excel spreadsheet,
Nice.
Everyone I've contacted, date, what did I talk about, blah, 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 like anything like that. So really just doing that. And luckily I'm with Deforio, like my agent's amazing, Mariah, she's just great. And so through that, she, felt strongly about my work. Very long pitch cycle, I think, because COVID has just really fundamentally changed the industry. And I think publishing, my my like day job is more tech related, so it's like very advanced tech, and publishing is not that. So I think the whole like now you have to work from home and bring all these things home with you is like very difficult for the industry as a whole. And I just mentioned that for people. I'm in a lot of groups of other writers who are doing submissions and stuff like that, and so many people are like, why is it taking so long? And myself included, I was like, is this never going to sell? And it's just, it's longer right now. It sucks. It sucks not having control, but it's just a longer pitch cycle.
Definitely. I think COVID has helped the creative world and also hindered at the same time. So it's one of those things you kind of just have to try and take advantage of when you can. It's definitely not the first time I've heard a spreadsheet for submissions. I think it's a great idea. The only difference to what I've heard before is that someone actually puts the feedback in the end of the spreadsheet as well. So you know what submissions or agents you sent to, and you know what kind of they suggested as well. And always, obviously, it's not, don't take it as criticism, constructive criticism always. Yeah.
And well, there's a study that was done about performance, and like they actually found, I forget what that's called, but there's like a club of people who try and collect rejections, and I am so into all of this.
Wow.
So basically the premise is like a lot of times people are like, you know, in your career or in other areas that aren't creative, it's like, okay, well, when I get to this next level, then, you know, I've succeeded. But a creative career is not linear. And so there's a lot of like feeling sad and frustrated when you get rejections because you're not getting to that thing you want so badly. So one of the beliefs is like, the more you get rejected, you should celebrate rejection. And Stephen King talks a lot about this on his book, in his book on writing. He used to pin his rejection letters up on the wall. I made an Excel spreadsheet, and this was 1 year I did it. It was for all of the rejections. So acting, voiceover, satire, personal essay, like everything. And at the end of the year, I had been rejected 400 times. So that's more than once a day. And I was like, oh, this is why I'm like a little like emotionally unstable sometimes. Like this explains a lot. But so many great things had happened. I got into literary reviews, you know, like all these amazing career opportunities had come out of it. And so looking at face value, it's like, oh my gosh, this is so depressing. Why is this girl doing like comedy if she's getting so many rejections? But what came out of it was some forward progression in my career, and I wouldn't be where I was today if I hadn't had all of those rejections.
Absolutely. I mean, it is one of those things that you need to either harness or kind of let destroy you. And I don't think if you were just to take that criticism, you're not really ready to do what you want to do. But that's incredible. And so you went from building on those rejections to making the next steps when it came to writing and acting and voiceovers. Voiceovers kind of interested me as well. Was that part of your kind of natural process as through comedy into voiceovers, or was that something you kind of seeked out to do?
Yeah. So through acting, like a lot of actors will do voiceover. And so then I signed with an agent here in LA, and like have a voiceover reel and everything. So it kind of was like a linear offshoot of kind of acting and performing. And now I will be doing the voiceover for my books, which I'm super excited about. I have so many foreign accents that I need to practice.
Wow. Are you any good at foreign accents?
No.
No? I hope we're going to get a demonstration then. I did try once to record my own audiobook, and wow, was it hilarious when I suddenly realized I needed to voice other characters and then could not do it.
Yeah. Like props to those people who do those. Like they're amazing. Those actors are amazing.
Oh, wow. So have you got any preference? So obviously, I imagine you love all kind of the work areas that you work in, but when it comes to directing or writing comedy or voiceovers, do you have a real love for one over the other?
Oh, it's so hard. They're all like very different in how I enjoy them.
Mm.
I'd say I'm doing less performing at the moment because I'm writing. But it was actually like a piece of really good advice I got. So I'm in the Women in Film mentorship program here in LA, which is an organization to have more women in film.
Okay.
Behind the scenes, there's like a huge disparity between women writers and women directors compared to men. So that program paired me and a group of other content creators and in this case actors with a showrunner for the show Good Trouble. Her name's Joanna Johnson. She's amazing. And so she started as a soap star and now writes and show runs her own shows on Freeform. And so she was like, I was like, I write, I direct, I act, like I'm just, what do I do? And she was like, focus on the one thing. And if you're good, they will let you do all the other things.
Mm.
And so that was really amazing advice for me. Because I was like, okay, the other things will come. And it's funny, even though I'm focused more on writing, I'm in a commercial for Meta, like Facebook, and she had me on her show as a character. So like all these opportunities started coming on the other sides of things while I was actively being like, no, I am just writing comedy right now.
Yeah.
So the universe sometimes is like, you got to do these other things. I love them all. What I love about writing is that I can do it on my own and I have full control. Acting is you're at the end of the system, right? Like someone has written characters already and you are playing those characters. And I think writers have a beautiful piece where they have control. Because like I met with one actor and he's disabled. And so for him, he's like, I am so frustrated because I never get submitted for non-disabled roles. And I talked to him and I was like, yeah, this is why we need writers who write these roles that are for everyone. And unfortunately, that's not really it's happening more now, but it's still like a growing thing. And so I feel like as writers, you have more control and you can create opportunities that are better for the world and that share different stories. And then if you write a book for screenwriting, you own the IP, which to me is like a beautiful thing. So I kind of like book writing because I have more control over the stories I have. Well, if you're a screenwriter, you sell the story to the studio. The studio owns your story. Which means you have a little bit less control. But if your book is made into a screenplay, you own the IP, so you have more control. So those are kind of like weird businessy logistical things, but they are important if you are a writer who does like to do different types of things, to think about how you work with that. Personal essays too, they're beautiful to write, but you should always read the contracts for who owns the IP afterwards, because your story could be sold for film and you might not have control. And if it's like a very personal story, you might want to like hold on to that. So it's just, not to get into the boring business side of things, but it is kind of important to know what your rights are and where you are with that.
Definitely, I would imagine, as you said, especially if it's a personal story, you really want to keep hold of that. So, going back to your advert, I did see that on social media, your Meta Facebook advert. Yeah, it's quite interesting. I mean, was that kind of an in-person thing, or is because of the way the world works now, is this like a virtual kind of recording?
So for that, it's so funny because it's for Meta Portal, right? So it's like, it literally is exactly like this. But we needed to shoot it, like with high like red cameras, like the best quality equipment and everything. So it was during COVID. And so, lots of COVID safety protocol. I got tested multiple times. And then you're on set and, you need to wear your mask. But it's also this weird thing where you're in this bubble where everyone else has been like highly tested, which is not happening outside. So yeah, but it was all in person and everything. But it, when you watch it, right, it's through a screen, so it's kind of fun. But I basically had to act into the screen, which was funny because I'm staring at a screen and pretending that I'm talking to someone on the other side.
I
And
mean,
they had the mirror so that the mirror reflected the directors up onto the camera's lens.
wow.
So I'm looking at the directors who are kind of like trying to direct me, but I'm actually staring into the camera lens. So it was like a kind of funny, weird experience.
That does sound crazy. There was a film on Netflix recently. I think it was called The Bubble. Have you seen that?
Oh, yeah.
And that was very, yeah, it was okay, but it's very similar concept where all these actors went into this bubble and it was a crazy film. But it must have been even that kind of looked dated already, just because of the masks. And you think, wow. But it's lingering around. We don't want to go back to that, but it's still there. But
I did, well, when I was on a TV show, I was in the middle of like when COVID was the worst in LA. And it was like a very surreal experience because, you know, I have a full face of like the thickest makeup ever. I have a mask on, which is obviously going to mess that up.
Yeah.
Then I had a plastic piece over my face.
Wow.
And then all of the cast was separated from the extras. So the extras were actually sitting in a completely separate part. Our cast was sit 6 feet apart outside on like a deck. So you're like talking to people, but they're 6 feet away. If you took your mask off to eat and then you forgot to put it back on, someone would come over and immediately be like, put your mask on, please. And then the crew was completely separate from us. So we would go and shoot something. We would leave that space that had fans blowing the air out. The crew would entirely go in, reset up everything. And then the crew would completely leave except for essentials like the director. And then we would come in and shoot. So it was like this very bizarre, you know, I mean, not completely necessary, but like,
yeah.
And I also understand why they're so intense about it, because if the director, for example, who works with both the crew and the cast gets COVID, right? That's days that you're back and you have to pay for whatever venue or whatever you've had set up. So it's extremely costly for the studios and everything.
That's when you look at something like Top Gun that came out and James Bond that got delayed, and you can see why they took their time with things like that as well. They wanted to get it right because it's something that is in the pipeline for years, and you don't want to kind of just rush it out because it's supposed to be out now, and the world's kind of slowed down. So I think I appreciated. I'm not sure if you've seen like Top Gun, for example. I appreciated how that turned out, and I could really feel that they took their time with it.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's such a good movie, and for a sequel, it is very hard to make a good sequel. And I mean, I think it's even better than the original. Like they did an excellent job.
It's strange, isn't it, how good that has been, and the response has been, as far as I have heard it, 100% amazed at how good that was. And it does feel like the industry has been quite not rushed, but there's an idea. Let's make it look fantastic. Let's get it out there. But this has been. It felt like the story was good, a lot better than kind of usual standard. And I'm not sure if that was a result of the care and commitment put into that because it was a classic film, or was it because they had that extra time and they took the extra time to get to that?
Yeah. And I think a lot of like the writing is so essential in those situations, and making sure that like, you know, people are comfortable saying no to scripts. Like I think Tom Cruise very much was like, I'm only going to create a sequel if it's good. Like I think I'm sure there's other people who are like safeguarding the IP, but I think he was very involved in making sure that it was like, you know.
Yeah, I've read something where he talks about the amount of times he'd been asked to redo this film or the sequel, and he was like, it's not ready. It's not what I want to do it for. And it wasn't until the script was right that he even considered taking it on. So he is someone who's a great professional, who's been around the block in the best sense. And I'm glad for that, because he takes the time to make the judgment on those sorts of things. Whereas I'm not entirely sure, yourself as a director as well, how do you feel, for example, say an author has had their book optioned? Do you feel like you could take suggestions from them or direction?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like whoever owns the original IP should definitely have a say in what's happening. It should be a partnership in my mind, is like, you're adapting it into a new medium. So you need to trust that the people who are taking it know what they're doing and are going to make the best version. But I think, understanding like at its core what the book is about, that's really coming from the author. So in my mind, it needs to be a partnership where both sides are really collaborating. And I think if both sides don't do that, that's where things kind of go off the rails, and then it's not good for anyone. It's not good. Yeah.
I mean, we'll get to talk about your memoir very soon. In fact, we'll jump onto that next. But if that became option one day down the line, and they made the film about your life, would you have any idea for casting for that?
I mean, I would love to act in it for sure.
Okay.
We'll see. I haven't really thought through who would be cast as things. When I write fiction, that's one of the things. And when I write nonfiction, I visualize who is saying the thing that's being said, because I found that if you get too in your head, like if I'm seeing myself talking to myself when two characters are talking, they're not rich individual characters. So I have to like really stop and be like, what does this person look like? What do I remember about them? Like, who are they as a person? And once I understand that, for nonfiction, I usually remember some of the things. I have like one of those weird memories where I remember conversations, but I like understand their vibe. And so that way I can really bring that to life. And in fiction, I always like pick what actors I'd want to do things, not because they necessarily will ever be acting in it, but for me as a writer, if I can't visualize who's saying it, it's going to sound like me talking to myself versus two individual people talking to each other.
Definitely. I mean, how do you kind of, do you discover your characters in that sense, kind of like a pants sting way where you just see them develop, or do you kind of plot down who they are and what they do and all those sorts of things?
Yeah, I feel like my stories usually start with like a vibe. I'm like, this is a cool vibe. This is not a story. It's just like a cool scene. And this scene would be really cool. And then I'm like, okay, who would be in the scene? And then it comes back to the comedy element of like, well, who would I want to see talking? And you probably want people who are like very different to be talking, right? Because that's just more interesting. And then I'm like, what is the weird quirk that each character has that can be like a funny ongoing thing? Like we talk about callbacks, which is bringing up a joke later. Okay, what is the funny thing that maybe this person has like a weird thing? Or I love Phoebe Waller-Bridge says that there needs to be 3 things happening in a scene at all times. So I love some of her things because it'll be like, in season 2 of Fleabag in the pilot, right? Like it's her family discussing something, and then the waiter is so nervous about serving them that it's like this added element where like I feel like a lot of people aren't like, okay, but how does the waiter feel? You know what I mean? But it adds like an extra comedic element of having this like very nervous person who doesn't know the like psychological trauma that's like going on with this family, and then like trying to interact with that is very funny.
Brilliant. Okay, let's jump into part 2. We've gone over this a little bit, and we'll find out what's the story about your memoir that's in the works. So here's part 2 coming up. Okay, Kristen, I know you're developing this at the moment, so it's not completed at the moment, but can you let us know a little bit about your upcoming memoir?
Yeah, so it's called Where to Nest, a global search for love, cheap wine, and a place to belong. And so it's really about finding belonging. So I think what's slightly different with my travel memoir than a lot of other ones is it's not just about being on vacation. A lot of the stories are about me like trying to create new lives in different places. And that involves like making friends, but also working and like all the things, experiencing healthcare in China, right? Like there's all these different things that come along with trying to create a life in different places. So my book really covers that. I'd say like, I've been to 40 countries, and some of the stories are on travel. I'd say the wildest country I went to was North Korea, which as an American was super intense.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, I went to Greece when they had their banking, when Brexit was going on. So all the banks were closed.
Wow.
I was in Thailand during a government coup. So there's been like some very unique experiences. And then some of the other stories are about like working. So when I worked in China, I worked for the largest wine importer there. So it's about like the chapter I'm writing this week is on being at my first wine dinner in a bunker, a Cold War era bunker underneath a hotel owned by the Chinese government.
That sounds
So,
incredible.
yeah, it was like they had a wine cellar with like you used your thumb as like your keypad, and it, like it read. I'm like, why don't they do this at the airport? Like I feel like there's so many places that I like haven't seen that technology, but the wine cellar at this place had that, and each person had their own little like wine cellar within the wine cellar with their own thumbprint. I was
No
like, this is
way.
crazy. Yeah.
So what does that do? Register who's drinking stuff, or?
To access the wine cellar, you had to use your thumb for the main door, and then each person has their own private, kind of like a cubby. It was like a little space, and so all of their wine is stored in there. Yeah, it really was like a spy movie. And then the main room where we had the dinner was in this huge like glass. They put glass up, and I was like, why is there glass? And they were like, oh, sometimes the rocks fall. And I was like, oh, okay, has someone
What?
remembered? Like I'm a little bit worried. um but it
Wow,
was,
that's incredible.
yeah, I was in this bunker, and it was in Hangzhou, which I'm trying to think what the British equivalent would be. The US equivalent in New York would be like Greenwich, Connecticut, which is like a fancy suburb. LA, it might be like Orange County is the fancy suburb here. I'm not sure.
No,
Kensington, I don't know.
maybe near Chelsea, perhaps. I'm not sure.
Yeah. So it was we like took a train there and hosted this wine dinner in the cellar. So there's experiences like that where like I had just moved to China, and I moved to China in early September. Didn't have a job, didn't have a place to live, didn't speak Chinese, knew 3 people, like just was like, I'm going to move there and make this work. And so then it was like through the struggle of like, how do I make friends? Like, how do I talk to the taxi driver so I can get somewhere? Like what are all these things that you have to learn to live somewhere? And luckily I met the marketing director at this wine company. And so
Wow.
a month in, I'm like in a bunker underground. I should note that another reason we were drinking underground is because there's austerity measures that Xi Jinping put in place to discourage like spending on expensive wines and expensive hotels, right? Because under communism, like there shouldn't be this luxury lifestyle happening. So these kind of things these big laws are like changing the industry and are the reason that then it's like, oh, well, you can drink really nice wine where no one can see you in a bunker underground.
Wow, that sounds incredible. I just picture like, it sounds like a spy movie, James Bond in a little glass room, and something about to go wrong, and it sounds crazy. So that memoir is sounding like an amazing thing to read.
Yeah. So and it's also about like figuring out like my career, but like what does it mean? I feel like right now there's the Great Resignation going on. I believe it's in the UK too, where like a ton of people are quitting. They're like, this job sucks, like why am I doing this? And I feel like that's a huge movement. And as I've had a very untraditional career, and growing up everyone was like, you need to stay with the same job forever, and like blah blah blah. And it's like I did the exact opposite. I like ignored all the advice that was given to me, and somehow I'm fine. So I feel like that's an important message, is like, if you want to do something that's different, like that job is there and you can find it. It's terrifying, and there's moments where life sucks, but like at the ultimate end, you're happier because you're finding that thing that really like makes you happy.
I think you're definitely right there. So many people from in Parliament right now to people in every job I know have either gone into new work or looking for new work. And it's especially through lockdown has caused a revolution of self-employed entrepreneurs and people who tried and failed and people who tried and succeeded. So it really has shifted the way that our kind of government and communities work, and it's a very interesting time to be alive. And there's so much going on, and it's hard to keep up with everything, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just like a constant struggle with us. But good things will happen. We all have to make those choices. But in the background, it's like, what is happening? What is the government doing right
Yeah,
now?
what are they up to?
I mean, you guys are dealing with that at a larger level than we are right now. We already went through that.
I mean, do all these kind of crazy things that are happening feed into comedy and to being able to write comedy?
Yes. I think that also tonally what people are looking for changes based on the world around them. We want escapism. And when the world is really calm, we have the capacity and seek out dark stuff. When the world is a dumpster fire, which it is right now, like people don't want dark. They want like Ted Lasso. They want funny things. And so I think that's really important, especially in writing. I think that tonally Squid Games is escapism and very dark, but thinking about what the market and what people want to consume right now, they want things that are lighter because like life is hard right now. It's very stressful. And my view on comedy is that jokes help us. It's like a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. I think that comedy can help really make more difficult issues accessible and easier to consume because it's hard on your free time. If you've had a really long day, it's hard on your free time to read something really sad, right?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, or like, and so I think comedy helps take something that can be really dark and make it so that it's more enjoyable, but you're also like empathizing and learning about other people, and that's really beautiful.
I definitely agree. Anya says that comedy is a great type of escapism, like you said, and it is. And I can kind of respond to relate to what you said there. That if it's been a kind of one of those long days that everybody gets through, sometimes it's easy to come on and just flick something on the telly that's a comedy, and just sit there with that in it and try to soak it up. Because more often than not, you'll forget kind of what's going on and pick up on that. Rather than just sit there and think about the bad things that have happened to the day. So I do use comedy a lot more than I realize. And things like TikTok, for example, now is blown up that ability for people to share their sort of comedic side and spread the joy in that sense, even from skits that are just flying all over the world right now. Is that something you've tapped into, or is it something you're thinking about?
I like right now I'm very on Twitter because it's just takes so much less energy to like write a tweet than it does to like make a video and like put makeup on and make sure the sound's right and what angle and everything. Which then my director brain goes into, but I have with currently writing my book, I don't have time for that. So, but I believe that like the cool thing about the internet and about these platforms is that like it's a little bit the democratization of content in that someone who lives in like, cat videos, like all the time. I will watch so many cat videos. But yeah, it's like the democratization of content where like someone who you used to write have to move to LA, try and get an agent, blah, 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 for people to even like see you practice your craft. And I feel like with TikTok and with Twitter and with Instagram, like people from all over the world can suddenly like show their humor and connect with people. And whether that's creating a big following or finding a tiny niche, that's just people who like really like cats, which is not a small niche. That's like everyone should. But you can connect with people and be like, you know what, I'm just going to only make cat videos and this is my thing. And that's beautiful. I think that's great.
It is. And it's, I do like how that has given people a platform to be completely original in other senses as well. And just kind of do what they maybe have never thought about doing because they lived in that bubble and now they've experienced that. So I think it's a good thing. Okay, we're going to jump into the last section of the show. So if you guys have any questions, please do put them in there. In fact, before we do that, I would like, have you got any more cool, interesting travel stories that you'd like to say?
I'm trying to
because I find them fascinating and I'm very untraveled. So this is like really cool.
Well, one of the weirdest experiences, and it was intense, was going to North Korea. As an American, most Americans we're allowed to go there, but you have to be very conscious of what you're doing. So basically, there's one hotel that foreigners are allowed to stay in Pyongyang.
Wow.
And it's on an island, so you're not going anywhere. To write an email, it is $4 for 25 kilobytes.
Wow.
So opening your Gmail is going to cost you hundreds of dollars even before you like send an email. And I stayed in that hotel, which is, I'm blanking on his name. An American college student stayed there a few years after me, and he took a paper poster off the wall, and he was accused of being a spy. He suffered a severe brain injury while in their custody and unfortunately passed away. So while I was there, that had not happened yet, but I have a degree in international affairs. So I'm like fully and hypersensitive to what I'm doing, right? Like I'm in a country that everyone there is taught that they are at war with my country, that my country might bomb them at any moment. And I got like a little bit of a threat from our guard at the beginning. He was trained in Germany, and he was like, there's storming and performing, and we want to be the performing group. We don't want to be the storming group. And then he asked me if I watch Fox News, and I was like, not really. And he was like, just be performing with this group. Don't be storming. And that was his way of just basically being like, do not talk back to me and spread all your propaganda. And I'm like, cool, message received, not here to do that. I'm not here to change any minds. I just want to experience what it's like here so that I can understand this, menace and this country that is not really commonly visited. So it was a very intense trip. No one there has internet. And so imagine like, it's also an agrarian society. So like we went to their top university and everyone's writing in notebooks. Now, like imagine going to a university at the UK or in the US, right? Like they didn't have computers. Like to me, that's just wild.
Yeah.
And then they took us to their library and they were like, you can get any book you want. So someone was like, do you have Lord of the Rings? And so he asked the woman, she's like, no. It's checked out. And then they're like, but here's some books you can look at. And then they gave us a book about like how to raise chickens. And it's like, okay.
Wow.
Yep. Every book. We have every book. Got it.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
It really is. I mean, you must have been a very brave person in a lot of these scenarios to go and do these things because, as you said, you've gone there with, I assume, a lot of confidence and being prepared to learn about the cultures and these things. But a lot of people wouldn't do that, especially in that sort of scenario. Do you kind of feel the pressure in that sense, or were you quite comfortable in your own ability to sort of negotiate those conversations?
There were moments that I was nervous, and it was definitely like a very emotional situation. Like we went to the War Museum, which they planned last minute. I think they were not sure, maybe because my group had 14 nationalities because we came from Shanghai. So it's people from all over the world. I was the only American. And so a lot of times this is before the American was taken. And so a lot of times the Europeans would be like, why are you freaking out about this? And I'm like, because the main guide spoke English. There was another guide who spoke Chinese, who normally, right, the Chinese guide would not be with Americans. He would only be with Chinese tourists. But because our group had so many different nationalities, so he throughout the trip would come up and yell at me, I hate your country. Your people are terrible. Like just periodically. And I would just be like, thank you. Like not engaging.
I mean, there's nothing you can really do in that situation, is there?
No. And like, I like being respectful of their country and also like having an international affairs background. The guy who got taken, he stole a poster, a paper poster off the hotel that I stayed in, the hotel that had rolling blackouts because the power goes out periodically because the country is like, again, like agrarian level of like not even industrialization level of development. And so it was just being very conscious of what was going on. And at the War Museum, they took us and they showed us all the different equipment that they had taken from the US soldiers and the Koreans during that war. And the last photo was a picture of a bullet hole through the back of an American soldier's head.
Wow.
And they were like, we caught him, and we're like proud and showing this off. And most museums I go to are not like, don't you see this person we killed? This is great. It's like, and then they showed us a video which had like dead Korean children. And they were like, why did these children die? The Americans. And so like stuff like that is like so difficult to see, and as well as see the framework in which it's presented as like how we set up enemies and how we use that kind of thinking to connect each other as people as well as disconnect each other. So that was like after that museum, they had another room that had soldiers, like fake soldiers, like kind of dolls. And one was on the ground and a crow was eating it. And then they played music and were like, it was called the Victory Room. And it was like celebrating these soldiers that had died during World War II that were cowards. And it was like, those kind of things are so intense. But I wanted to see it because I want to understand how that thinking happens and how do you create like fear and control, because I think a lot of that is about control. And then also seeing like the severe poverty of the country, like a small group of people that runs North Korea has all this power, and all these people like are starving to death, don't have proper healthcare, don't even have the internet.
Yeah.
Someone brought out like their iPhone and our guide was like, what is that? Because he has like a Nokia, and it's like an iPhone, like an iPhone's so much part of our society.
Yep.
So
it's crazy. I mean, wow. I applaud you for doing that. And really, that's the first time I've ever had insight into something like that. And I find that quite terrifying. So thank you for that. But we're going to move on, finish off with a bit of a brighter side of things in the last part of the show. So if you've got questions, guys, send them in. We haven't got much time left, but I'll throw a few WCCS questions at our guest, and let's see if she's got answers for them. Okay, then, Kristen, let's start you off with something quite easy.
Okay.
Old classic saying or a question. What book would you take to a desert island if you could only take one?
I love Kristen Newman's While You Were Breeding, which is another travel memoir. And she's currently writing on Only Murders in the Building. Huge fan. And her book is about like traveling instead of having children. So it's all about like kind of like discovering yourself abroad, which is very on theme with mine. So I could read about people traveling every day, all day.
Brilliant. Okay. What was the last book you read or last film you watched? Either of those is good.
Last book I read was David Sedaris's most recent one, Happy Go Lucky, which is really interesting. It's personal essays. So as you can tell, I'm doing my research as I'm writing. But it's so good. It's like he uses humor as well, but he covers a lot of really dark issues. Unfortunately, his father recently passed away. So it's a lot of like family relationship pieces and kind of like reconciling differences. And but if he's funny, so you're like laughing and you're like, this is so terrible, but also very funny.
Yeah, that's always a good combination. Okay, let's go for a silly one in there. Pineapple on pizza, yes or no?
I'm gonna vote no. I mean, I've had it and it's not horrible, but it's not something that I want to revisit.
I was definitely on the fence, that one. Okay, let's push out Star Wars or Star Trek.
Star Trek for sure. I worked as an intern for CBS in college one summer, and I met Leonard Nimoy, and he is the nicest man ever. So fan for life.
Brilliant. Okay, so let's get more serious questions in there, shall we? Because they're all the silly ones. If you could take any ending from the world of fiction, TV, film, books, literature, what ending would you take and change, and why? And it doesn't have to be bad reasons. It can be for a good reason.
This is completely not unique, but Game of Thrones. I mean,
justified though.
It's just so sad. And when we talk about IP and this like beautiful, like amazing,
that's
you know,
I
think they just didn't want to work on it anymore. I mean, they didn't. They were like, we're done. We've done this for too long. But like, then, I don't know, get some new writers in the room, or like get people who are still excited to like finish that off. Don't let it just makes me so sad. It's terrible.
Well, they were that quick to end it that way. And then suddenly there's a new spin-off coming with Jon Snow. So there you go. They couldn't have been that eager to get rid of it, could they?
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So they should have taken their time, is what I'm getting at. Okay. That's a good answer. And we've had that a couple of times, and I get that fully. If you could take any character from fiction, and let's say take that character on an adventure with you, as you like to go on adventures, what character would you take?
Okay, so I think I do you guys have Barry in the UK? The
Barry?
show, Bill Hader's show on HBO.
Not that I know of.
Oh, okay. Well, there's a character on there called NoHo Hank, and he is I think he's Czech, maybe Russian, mafia guy who is also gay, and just like a very goofy, like basically dealing with he kills people, but like trying to deal with the emotions of like communicating better. Like I feel like I'd love to bring him with me, because he's always like trying to be like the team leader, but the team leader in the like maybe like softer, sweeter, empathetic way that leadership as a whole is trying to transition to. But then when you're leading like a mafia of murderers, like how do you be like, okay, I don't think you're communicating very well with that person because you just cut their head off. So, like that, I feel like I would love to travel with him because he's just so goofy.
Brilliant. Anya says, I love David Sedaris.
I think it's
Sedaris' work. He's great on audiobook as well. Does he narrate himself? I'm not sure. Okay, Anya says, what was the craziest improv session you've had?
Oh my gosh, improv. Improv, I'm trying to think. That's a hard one. I haven't performed that much recently because during COVID, everything shut down. And I was like, I'm not doing Zoom improv. I just cannot. But I'm trying to think like what are...
So we can move on if you're stuck with that one. We'll come back to it. Linda says, great question. Do you still have any countries left on your bucket list?
Yes, I would love to do a lot of Latin America. I haven't really been... I was in Nicaragua in high school. I did like a house building trip there. But I really want to see like Argentina, Chile, Peru. I have a very good friend from Colombia, and it sounds amazing. So that's like my next, and it's on the same time zone. So it's like super easy to do from LA.
Always a perk.
Yes.
I mean, a great show that we would like to see is obviously Kristen Van Nest on the go. That'd be a great documentary to see things like that.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah. Okay. Linda says a hitman who's on a journey of self-exploration. Interesting.
Yeah, it's called Barry, and it's Bill Hader, who was on SNL. It's very funny. It's amazing. Basically, he's a hitman who, instead of going to therapy, takes like a washed up acting class in LA and tries to connect to himself through like acting. So it's very funny.
Okay. Good stuff. Right. Last couple of questions. We have gone over by 3 minutes, but that's fine. What song would you sing at a karaoke bar?
Oh, I always do If I Think I'm Sexy by, I'm blanking on his name. Is it Rod Stewart? Yes.
I think it is, yeah.
So I always do that song. there's two songs. I do that one, and then I sing it as if I'm like angry. Because if you listen to the lyrics, it is such a creepy song. And so no one like listens to the lyrics. They're just like, oh, he thinks he's sexy. But then he's like, I'm going to turn down the lights and all this stuff. And you're like, whoa, wait, like, this is weird. Like, it's actually like a really weird song. So I love to do that, but like very straight faced. And then, I'll do Stronger by Britney Spears, but I will go up and be like, I usually start with like, this is for my ex and cousin, Rod. And then I go up and pretend that I'm like getting over this breakup, but that it's someone that's also in my family. So the audience is like, is she actually angry about the breakup? But like, also, why is she saying that she's mad that he wouldn't bring her to their family reunion? Like, it's just, so I do it kind of like as if I'm getting over a breakup and this is how I'm not handling it well. But it's always really fun to do because people be like, yeah, fuck him, like he's the worst. And then I'll be like, you didn't bring me to our family reunion. And they're like, whoa, wait,
Brilliant.
We're related? Like
that is a great way to do karaoke and put like some emphasis on the story and then twist it up there. I love that.
Yes, it's so much fun.
Wow. Okay, cool. What I'm going to do is ask the last question is a bit more of a serious one.
You can ask me about lots of things, especially weather and travel.
That was one of those. Yeah, thanks for that one. Okay, so that's brilliant. If you're looking back on your career down the line, what would success look like for you?
This one's hard. I feel like success is just like being happy, content.
Yeah.
I wish I was good at that. I think that I get bored really, like that is my greatest strength and my greatest weakness is that I just get bored. And so I'm constantly like moving or like switching jobs or new projects or everything because I'm just like, what's the next exciting thing that I'm going to do? But I feel like success is being like, hey, like I'm actually really happy where I am. Like we're in a good spot. And so hopefully I'll get there.
Yeah, I'm sure you will. I mean, that's a great one to have. I mean, being content is ultimately the goal of life, isn't it? And
yeah,
I mean, with all your sort of different careers that you have in terms of directing, writing, and acting, and all these sorts of things, I'm sure that you will be plenty filled with opportunities and sort of projects to keep you going in that sense. But before we do wrap this up, when can we expect your memoir to be released?
Yeah, so it'll be coming out in April 2024. And in the meantime, feel free to follow me on Twitter, Instagram. That's where Chris and I met. I tweet a bunch of jokes every day. It's how I procrastinate. So enjoy. And I will be posting updates and stuff on there. So that's definitely the place to keep in touch for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, Twitter and Instagram as well is quite good on your social accounts. Lots of jokes popping up on there as well. I went through some Instagram videos and there was one you did a sketch with some wine. That was good. Something about pegging at some stage.
I'm trying to think what that was. Oh, I was in a show that had like a pegging scene.
Yeah.
Not porn. I was not in porn.
Not putting that as in I saw that.
Oh, I was in the porn. No, I was not in porn. I was in the sketch, and then I put it, basically it's like a scene where my friend is having sex and I'm tutoring her while she's doing it. This was for a show that's on Amazon Prime. And it like weirdly went viral on Twitter. So I think it had like 180,000 views or something. Wow. But it was like really weird because I'd periodically get DMs about pegging. Yeah. And at first I was like, why are all of these people asking me about pegging? And then I was like, oh, it's like
actual advice coming through, how do you do this?
Yeah, I'm sorry, but I cannot help you on your pegging journey. I can't. Best of luck.
Yeah, brilliant. And a great way to end the Writing Community Chat show. Always end it fun and with pegging this week. So, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. If you're listening back to this, thank you so much. If you watch it back, thank you. Please consider hitting a thumbs up, leaving some comments below. If you've got any questions you want to ask on social media, tag Kristen and myself. And in fact, I'll leave the social links in the description. But thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Please stay safe, and we will see you very soon. From me, it's goodbye, Kristen. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me. This was awesome.
Bye, guys.